All right. Good evening, everyone. It's a beautiful Saturday evening on November 13th, 2021. My name is Pete Jones, and I am the host of the Good in the Head podcast. Welcome to the show. Today, we have a very special guest on. Her name is Mila Diamond. Mila, I've known for a couple of years now and been following and learning from her. I met her first on a Facebook group called the Impact Theory League, which I highly recommend checking out and joining. So many great people are a part of that, and I was gifted the acquaintance of Mila as part of being in that group. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Mila. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Pete. It's my pleasure and my honor.
Appreciate you. Now, to introduce Mila, I'm going to keep it short, and we're going to get right down into the nitty gritty of what she does and some of the things that she's learned in her lifetime that she now has been trained for years to help others learn how to do and practice. Mila trained and studied with a Dr. Lenz for 15 years. He was a Buddhist monk. She teaches meditation, and I think that once we dive into it, we'll find out that there are many kinds of meditation, and I'm really curious to learn a lot more about the particular type of meditation that she teaches. She is a trained and ordained Buddhist monk, and she's a trainer, teacher, and a coach, and she has a business where she goes into offices and companies and empowers people with tools to enhance their skills through meditation. Mila has also given a TEDx talk, and once I upload this interview to YouTube, I'll be putting the link to that in the notes down below. One of the main points that I got from Mila when we were discussing things earlier in preparation for the podcast was, she said, our personal history can hold us back. And so I'm not going to dive into Mila's background. She can share what she feels inclined or inspired to share along the way as we go into this discussion. And one thing I really appreciate about Mila and that I'm grateful for is that she sort of pushed me right out of my comfort zone. I've never gone live before. And so this is sort of a new experience for sure. So thank you.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Now, before we get started, can you explain in better detail what it is that you do when you go into a company or into a group or do one-on-one coaching with people?
Well, I have two lanes of business, so to speak. One of them, like you pointed out, is meditation, mindfulness, and integration of spirituality and practice of meditation and mindfulness with life, with business, career success, with personal relationships. So we're not practicing in isolation somewhere away from people. How can we help people if we are away from people? But what I've learned from my teacher and what I teach is how to practice the spirituality while we are in this life. So we can use our businesses and our career as a training ground. It's kind of a practice of our yoga. There are different intent that we have when we practice spirituality through business or through a relationship than rather going to work just to make money or being in a relationship so we're just not by ourselves alone, right? So that's one line of what I'm doing. And the second line of what I'm doing, I am coaching public speaking, even though it's funny for me to even think about it, because when I came to United States, I didn't speak any English, and I spent 4 years like I was in a silent movie. But my teacher told me that I needed to write and I needed to speak. And initially I kind of laughed when he told me that, because I couldn't imagine doing that. And yet I was open to it, and I was a student, I was an apprentice. And therefore, I applied myself, and I was writing articles in Technology magazine in my previous career. And of course, since many articles on spirituality, meditation, mindfulness. And with public speaking, it's varies. It's TEDx talks, TED Talks. It's business presentations. It's pitching to investors or creating just a keynote and very inspiring talk. So those are the two areas I'm focused on.
Oh, that's awesome. The TEDx talk, you did a really great job. I've watched it more than once. I've really enjoyed how you interacted with the crowd and how you presented yourself. It was very well done.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah. I feel that when we speak in front of people, we often tend to think that we are the star and we focus on ourselves. And when we focus on ourselves, we become self-conscious. And so we become less natural, and there is no connection with the audience because they feel it. They feel that we're in our head, we're not with them. And when I am on stage, I'm the same as I'm with you right now. So you just connect with people, and it's not about me. It's not even about me delivering my message. It's about my audiences receiving my message.
I love that. Are there any other tips or tricks that you've learned along the way for public speaking that make you feel more comfortable and more at home in your own skin?
Yes, I'm trying to connect with what's true to me. And since for me, my spirituality, my meditation centers me, that's what I focus on before I go on stage. So I definitely meditate before I go on stage. I mean, every morning I meditate, but on the day when I am on stage, I meditate extra with extra effort. And before I go on stage, if I feel nervous, if I feel a little bit too jittery or not sure, I feel I start to forget things, I just rephrase it that this is excitement, because the physical symptoms of excitement are very similar to the ones that are of anxiety. So instead of saying, oh my God, I'm so scared, I'm anxious, I say, oh, I'm so excited. I can't wait to be on stage. It's going to be so much fun. So I just psych myself out to be on stage and to be with people. I'm just looking forward to connect with people, not thinking about me going and being on stage. Oh my gosh, everybody will be looking at me. No, it's like, I'm going there to see people. I'm going there to see some bright eyes, some people I can connect with, create that precious human connection.
Nice. I've actually heard about that. Some from rock stars, like at the beginning of the career, a lot of them, they're really nervous, and they say the ones that are highly successful, they'll go in and they'll say just what you said, like they'll get those same feelings that everybody else gets, but they interpret it subconsciously and consciously as excitement, and
yeah,
they go out and just kill it every time. But the ones, like you said, when you're self-conscious and you're a little nervous, it's a little harder to perform at any level like that.
Oh, absolutely. Also, when we're worried, when we're in anxiety and nervous, we disconnect from our limbic mind. So we like our prefrontal cortex kind of like locks us in, and we don't remember anything of importance. But if we focus just on the person in front of you, or people, this person, that person, whenever I speak to a very large group of people, let's say a couple of thousand people, 5,000 people, I never think of it, I'm speaking to 5,000 people. I'm thinking I'm speaking to one person 5,000 times. So it's always intimate. And if I'm delivering a thought, I give a thought to that one person. And then I continue thought, like if there is another thought, then I focus on someone else. I noticed that a lot of people kind of look above the crowd, like above the head. So some bad coaches give that advice, unfortunately, that don't look people in the eyes. You will get distracted, you will get nervous, focus above it. Some of them even say, imagine them being naked. God knows. No.
No thanks, huh?
No thanks.
That'd be a little distracting.
No. It would be very distracting, I would say. So instead, I lock in specifically on each person who I'm speaking to, and everybody else kind of pulled in because we have this intimate conversation with someone. Everybody else kind of leans in. But if I'm just scanning the audience and using phrases like all of you, most of you, how do you feel? Like not talking to me. But if I just say you and I'm speaking directly to you, then the people feel that intimacy.
I've heard another great way to connect with others is also to use the word we, as in we are all in this together, and that's really
Yeah,
been useful.
very useful. It takes a lot of intuitive etiquette, because sometimes when we say we may assume something about a person or people in the audience that may or may not be right. So when we say we have to be very conscious of that assumption.
Yeah.
And the same about you. So if I'm saying you, it's usually asking a question or creating presupposed something, but letting them know that I'm not specifically talking that they are doing that or they're thinking that, but it's just my interpretation of it.
I love that. There's a scientist named Andrew Huberman, and
I love him.
isn't he
Love
great?
him. Wonderful. Absolutely. It's
He
like,
works for
definitely.
Huberman Labs, and he's got a podcast on
Yeah.
YouTube, and he's got this trick where you breathe in and then a really quick breath at the end and then let it all out like
Yeah. That's
and,
relaxation. Yeah.
yeah,
That's changing state. Yeah. Yeah. I like that a lot.
it's such
Yeah.
a reset.
Yes. And he has this amazing app, just in case people are curious. There is an app, and I believe it works on both Android and Apple, and it's called State Breath, State Breath. So if you go in the App Store, you will be able to find it. It's kind of a black circle with a white circle in the middle. And he managed design and development of this particular app, and it gives you the specific rhythm of breathing, and it's just kind of visual. It contracts and it expands, and it tells you when to hold your breath, when to exhale. It leads you, and it actually asks you, how was it? Was it easy? Was it difficult? And so it adjusts, it learns based on your feedback. And I believe they have 4 modes. Awake, meaning like you just woke up, you want to awake. So there's a certain pattern of breathing. Then there is one for focus, there is one for relaxation, and there is one for falling asleep.
Wow.
So it's excellent app.
And he, if I'm not mistaken, is a neuroscientist. He's well researched all of these topics.
He is. Yes, he is. He's amazing.
That I'm glad you shared that. I hadn't even heard of that app yet, so that's good to check out. Thank you. Before we get into some items I did want to cover with you, could you explain what it was like for you when you, or like how you went into Buddhism, how you started to learn, what your schedule was like for 15 years while you were in training, and how you became an ordained monk? And
sure,
this is kind of interesting.
Thank you. Well, I'm not sure even how to describe how I came to it. I felt something since I remembered myself, since I was 4 or 5 years old. I remember I felt a presence around me. I felt that I could put my hand through this reality, and it felt like it was an illusion, like a prop on stage, and I could push right through it. It just felt like there was something else, that whatever I see isn't all there is, because I was feeling something that I didn't see. And when I asked people about it, my parents, they said there is nothing like that, and you shouldn't think about it, you'll go crazy, and it's all stupid, and it's religious and spiritual stuff doesn't exist, and it's all not real. The family, and my family, it was wonderful, very loving, very kind, but we were living in atheist country.
Hmm.
So it wasn't supported, the information wasn't available. And as soon as we left, I started reading everything I could get my hands on. I read the Old Testament, the New Testament, forwards and backwards, started reading other spiritual traditions. I went to churches, I went to synagogues. It felt better, but it didn't match what I was feeling since I was a child. And when we applied to live, I was born and raised in the former Soviet Union in Moscow. When we applied to live, when we actually submitted applications, and I remember I was the one who instigated my family to leave. It took me a few years to convince my parents that we should leave the country.
Hmm.
And when we finally collected all the documents and applied, I felt so much spirit around me. I felt so guided. Like it suddenly amplified everything I've been feeling my whole life to this crescendo, really powerful guidance, inner guidance that I didn't have any reference in the outside world. And one time a friend invited me, my friends invited me to see different teachers, Eastern teachers, Western teachers, whatever. And I was like, that was nice, but it still did not feel what I felt inside. It didn't match that. And when I went to see a teacher that she was studying with, when she invited me, that's when I felt immediate connection. I was like, oh, that's what I felt my whole life. So it's hard for me to say when I came to it. I felt it my whole life. And I couldn't understand my whole life. I was wondering, why am I going through so much hardships? Why am I going through so much heartache? Why am I so sensitive? What's wrong with me? Why do I not fit into this world, into this life? And so when I started meditating after meeting this person, Dr. Lenz, and I came back to see him again 10 months later after I meditated, and like from what I've learned from my friend, how he teaches meditation a little bit on my own, I started meditating. I came back to see him, and it was like layers of onions just kind of like came off. And it was clear to me, I was just drowning in tears sitting there in the audience somewhere in the back, because it was immediate understanding, the knowledge of everything that I went through in my life. I knew exactly why, and I knew exactly why I was here and what I was here to do. And it was immediate connection established. I knew I studied with this teacher in many lifetimes. It felt very much at home for the first time in my life. And that's how I started studying with him. Now, he was a very different teacher. He was a tantric teacher, and people misunderstand tantra. So I hope I would really like to clarify that. When tantra was mentioned in the West for the first time, for the first couple of decades, few decades, it was presented like something sexual yoga. Yeah. And it's not true. It's not what it is, okay? Tantra is a reconciliation of the opposites. In all traditional spirituality in religions, they would say, this is your spiritual life. This is your physical life. Keep them separate, completely separate. So you go to church, you listen to whoever is at the pulpit, and you maybe even confess, whatever you do, spiritual practice, it belongs to the church, a synagogue, a temple, whatever it is. And then you go in your physical life and you say, well, I'm not God, I'm not enlightened. And so your life doesn't reflect those spiritual values often, not always, but often it doesn't. And we learn it from traditional kind of religion texts that making money is not spiritual. Being in relationships isn't spiritual. You need to be celibate, you need to give everything away. Very traditional monastic life. And I would say it's a great beginning, meaning that if you were indulging your whole life in senseless in, extravaganza in all areas, whether physical or sensual, whatever. It's satiate you, but it's like it doesn't move you anywhere. It's empty by itself. So people move away from it and they go and practice meditation, mindfulness. They give everything away. They put on ochre robe or whatever color it is, and they think that they are on the bus. But that bus doesn't move anywhere. It's just a religious practice. And most people feel better in that environment because they feel at home with their brothers and sisters in the practice. And so they feel good, but they forgot their original purpose of getting into spirituality was to awaken to truth, completely truth within myself, truth in the world. How do I relate to the world? How the world relates to me? They forget all of this and they just practice religiously, literally, and do that. Tantra is more like an advanced, it's a graduate school of self-discovery, where some people who practice in, let's say, a monastery somewhere, realize that I'm here, I renounced everything. I'm not moving anywhere. Even though I meditate, it doesn't seem like I'm getting enlightened anywhere soon. And at that point, if they are truly seekers of truth and knowledge, they are honest with themselves. That's an absolute requirement on the path, to be completely self-honest. That's the key here. You have to be honest with what you feel, with what you want, and you need to see if that's the Dharma, if that's the truth, if that's the path. So if this person realizes that their path is actually full knowledge, not just being in a monastery, they often leave monastery and engage in the world practicing while they still meditate. But the world is different to them after practicing for many years or many lifetimes. The world looks different. They don't have the same hang-ups like average person. So we go to work and we look at our career and see that I can use my career as my yoga practice. For example, when I was working in technology, I was designing very complex systems for back office processing of trades for banks, investment banks, very large mainframe, huge architecture, international systems, large. And you can't do it with linear, logical, deductive mind. You just can't. When I went there, I went into more like a meditative state. I intuitively, by asking questions during the interview, I was able to point out, navigate intuitively to the problem they were having, to the bottleneck, usually within 20 to 30 minutes.
That's interesting.
And often was hired on the spot because of that. So when I was at work, I looked at my system like a mandala, this complex mandala, and I was trying to see how to make it work, how to architect it, how to design it in a way that it would work perfectly. To me, it was my yoga practice, not just during 1 hour meditation in the morning, but it might work all the other hours, 10 hours, however many, it was my yoga practice. So I had completely different attitude at work. If I am getting to know somebody, let's say in a relationship, I'm looking to see, where is this person coming from? What is their path? What is their dharma? And are our paths even compatible? Should we be together or not? And if we are, it's definitely would be with someone who is also on the path to knowledge. I wouldn't necessarily, I can't even imagine being with somebody who isn't, because that's not my life. And so Tantra is when you're living and working in the world, it's not like you're reaching out for something. It's you using whatever comes your way. So if your career is important, your business, which is very important, means I take it completely seriously. It's my practice. If I am in a relationship, I take that completely serious because that is my practice. But many tantric practitioners are completely celibate and single, because tantra is not just sexuality. When I was studying with my teacher, you asked me how was the process. A big part of our work together was through business, through careers, because he said, I need a medium. I need something to teach how the mind works. And business and careers are the perfect medium for it.
I remember you told me that he recommended computer science as a career path because of how
Yes,
it worked with the mind and meditation.
exactly. Yes. Because when you meditate, you need to stop thought completely. The way I was taught how to meditate, you stop thought completely. And when your mind is completely clear, you see layers that are not accessible when you're just trying to figure it out here.
So you
yeah,
mentioned
computers,
before that the onion, the layers, it's almost like a
yeah,
process of unbecoming all that you thought you had to be worthy of love, to live in this life, to be human,
yeah,
whatever. And now you're suggesting that to become recentered and grounded and thoughtless.
right. But at the same time, in the world, I am that kind of without thought, quiet and still, but still with people in the world, working, presenting, having a relationship, whatever it might be.
So life
So
is your yoga practice.
life is my yoga practice. That is tantra. That is tantra. There is another discipline in Hinduism, ancient yogic tradition, and that is Kama Sutra. Kama Sutra is specifically the science of lovemaking, of expressing your sexuality and sensuality with yourself or with other people. And it has really, that's all that is. But Tantra is completely different. Sensuality could be part of Tantra or it may not be. It depends on which phase of life you're in.
Would you call Tantra a full immersion into
Yes,
what you're currently doing in the here and now?
yes, it is. Yeah, but I'm not saying this is not spiritual, this is spiritual. I'm saying these are complementary sides of one whole life. Life has pain, it has pleasure. Life has cold, it has hot. It's duality. So just to say that this part of life is good and this part is bad, we never see the whole picture. We really never embrace love, God, whatever life. It never happens.
So experiencing contrast, the light, the dark, the hot, the cold, the extremes of both ends of the
Everything.
spectrum.
That's
That's the
Tantra.
beauty of life.
Exactly. Yeah, Tantra is life. That's exactly what it is. And that's why I'm just making a point that what people refer to often as Tantra is simply Kama Sutra and not Tantra. But
Yeah.
that's very poor translation.
Yeah, that
I
makes
guess
sense though.
it was marketable.
Yeah, back in the day. Well, we had talked before off camera about Ram Dass and
Mhm.
Maharaji, his guru, and how he
Yes.
went to India and found him and studied under him, lived in a cave, became more spiritual in his practices, and it really enhanced the depth of his life experience. And he said something that I found interesting. He said, if you think you're enlightened, go home and spend a week with your family.
Absolutely. 100%. I can attest to that one.
I'm guessing that what he meant by that was if you think you're all high spiritually and enlightened, be around people that press your buttons. And at work, at play, throughout the day in life,
Yeah.
many of us get our buttons pushed constantly.
Yeah. I don't think we need to go look for it. It just comes to us. So we deal with that. We're not looking for people who push our buttons, but if they happen to be around, we'll have to deal with that.
guessing, hoping maybe that meditation helps to become less reactive and to basically
Yeah,
remove the buttons from
absolutely.
ourselves.
Absolutely. I 100%. You know, when I came, but some years ago, when I came to this country, I was terrified of dentists, of all people. I don't know. So
Yeah.
whenever I would go to see a dentist, my dentist, he would just like, oh my God, not her again. Because I was so sensitive and I was just like, I don't want it. I don't want it. Imagine it was like, oh gosh, I have to hurt you. And it was awful. I could see that he absolutely hated whenever I came to see him. And then I started meditating. Couple of months later, just literally, I don't remember how long, not that long. I was just started meditating. Couple of months in, I came to see my dentist. I sat down and I thought, I'm just going to meditate. I'm just going to let my mind wander somewhere in a beautiful place, completely engage in it. And I relaxed, and he was working on me. And then sometime in, he's like, what happened to you? You're like a different person. You're not reacting. And he was touching the nerves and, you know, doing all the things that are awfully painful. And I was kind of like anesthetized. I did not really react. So yes, I would have to say for sure, meditation helps with managing reactivity. Also, when I work with people, I often work with people who have PTSD. I have clients who are veterans who have complex PTSD, meaning they might have had very difficult upbringing in childhood. Maybe that was part of them enlisting in the military. But then on top of all the trauma they had this really powerful assault with what happened to them during the deployments. And so they come back with acute PTSD on top of the complex PTSD. And I work with these people. And I know for sure that when we start working after a short period of time, just a couple of months, 3 months, 6 months in, a person who was completely reactive, we're talking explosive about anything, suddenly is able to recognize it in a moment and completely handle it differently. So yes.
What a
No
gift.
question. Yes, it is a gift.
You know, everything is information. They say that with our five senses as human beings, we actually have access to about 40 billion bits of information per second. That's massive. And we have a little thing in our brain that was installed called the reticular activating system that acts as a filter to keep our minds safe after childhood. And it sort of only allows in what we focus on and what we are running in
Absolutely.
our subconscious. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering, what's your opinion on meditation and the subconscious? What's the connection there?
The connection there is direct. Normally, people don't have access to their subconscious. It's when we're little children, we have access to the subconscious. Children feel everything. They speak their mind. They don't understand what's appropriate, what's not. I certainly did. Got my parents in trouble. And when we grow up, we lose that part of ourselves, and we just live by our, rational mind. That's how we're trained. We're trained to think through things, not experience things. Mm-hmm. And when we meditate, unless, of course, the forms of meditation that a person practices is something like guided meditation or affirmations, it really doesn't take them away anywhere, because they're still in their mind and they're still trying to affirm something, or they listen to somebody and it's still here. When we stop thought, on the other hand, different form of meditation, when we stop thought, the energy starts to rise, because our thoughts, emotions, perceptions, they're like white noise. We cannot see, we cannot feel anything. We don't see anything beyond these thoughts. When we're looking into the world, we're looking through the, shield of our perception, right? So what we do in meditation, we drop that completely. We get rid of that.
Is it a gradual unveiling of the shield, making it thinner and thinner, or is it just bam, all of a sudden it drops?
Exactly. Yeah, it's like you're poking every time you meditate like this. When you stop thought, you're poking holes in that veil of thoughts, ideas, perceptions that filter. You poke through them, and eventually more and more light start to come through, and you become more intuitive, because suddenly you get connected to your subconscious. And even beyond that, I think subconscious and conscious a little bit of a misnomer. There is no such thing as the separation per se between a conscious and subconscious mind. It's gradual. So there is no like barrier there. However, when we raise our energy, our Kundalini energy through meditation practice, for example, our connection goes beyond our subconscious mind into our higher self. That's when we go outside of this physical dimension and connect with our own spirit, maybe with the spirit of our teacher, somebody who is enlightened, fully enlightened, somebody who is truly wise. I wouldn't focus on anybody who is lesser than that, because everybody who isn't enlightened, which is just about most like everybody in the world, have their own karma. They have their own hangups. They have their own challenges. And when you focus on the person, you're not picking up only the beautiful light and transcendence, you also pick up all their limitations. So when I meditate, I don't focus on anyone except my teacher, because I knew him personally. I was his student for 15 years. So I know his consciousness, well, as much as I could see. We all see only what we can see. But either I focus on my teacher or I focus directly on the light. I never focus on anyone else ever, because I don't want anybody else's karma.
That's interesting. You mentioned something that really hit me hard. You said that true enlightenment manifests as unconditional love.
Yes, absolutely.
Ram Dass said that Maharaji, when he met him and he decided, oh my God, this is my guru. This is my teacher. I want to be around him all the time. And everyone seemed to feel the same way. He worked miracles, according to all the stories I've heard and read over the years. And he seemed to be a truly enlightened being in that he could give unconditional love. Like he knew, he could see into your soul, everything about you, and still love you.
Yes, exactly.
It's rare to meet someone like that.
It's so rare. I tried, whenever I meet people who ask me about my teacher, I have a really hard time describing it, because I've never met anyone like him in life. He was absolutely unique. I remember I invited my mother to see him. It was a special evening where we were allowed to bring guests, and I invited her. I flew her from Bay Area, where she lived at the time, to Los Angeles, where there was a special event where he was teaching at the time, many years ago, I believe in 85, something like that. And I remember driving her back to the airport the next day. And I remember talking to her, and I said, Mom, you see, I said, he looks just like a normal person, like a person. And she's like, no, he doesn't.
Interesting. That was her feedback.
That was her feedback, because he was very unusual, very unusual. Huh. If I spoke with him, like if he would be standing in front of me and I'm talking to him, his mind was so powerful, I couldn't think in his presence at all. Like my mind would go blank, and it would take me months and even years to decode, to remember, to recollect what he said, and to kind of actually being able to process it. Because when I was in front of him, I couldn't think. There's no way to think. Your mind just stops. And at the same time, I felt like I could put my hand right through him. He felt like he wasn't even there, even though he was right here in front of me. In fact, when I came back to see him, I mentioned after 10 months of meditating on my own, and I came to see him again, I remember he walked on stage and he sat down on a chair, and I was somewhere in the back. The whole room was glowing with golden light, which is very unusual. I've never seen anybody who claims that they are enlightened. I'm sorry. I've never been in anyone's presence other than this person who made the whole room glow gold. Like air was gold. And the people in front of me, like I would sit in the back and I would see just, it was kind of like in reverse, like photo negative, where everything is dark and there's just this beautiful golden arcs around people's heads, like just outlines. And that's throughout rows towards the front where he was sitting, like the whole room was glowing. And then he started meditating. I was looking in his direction. The whole area where he was sitting, it looked and felt like he was inside the fireplace, like those coals, coals, glowing coals, like everything was glowing there. And I was looking at him and I was like, I know he's there because I could still kind of see him. He didn't walk off stage. I know he's sitting there, but I could also see the back of the chair through him. So I've never seen anybody like that. We went to the desert. We meditated in the desert in power places. And I would sit in front row, like kind of semicircle around, and he would walk on the sand and give us the piece of his mind. He was quite demanding teacher, I would have to say. And he would walk and he would talk, and I would watch his feet. And because he was tall, and I would get tired of looking up all the time, so I would just sit and look at the ground. And I realized, wait a minute, he's walking. Why don't I see the prints, the footprints on the soft sand? He's walking, I don't see the footprints. That totally freaked me out. It was unusual and not expected. Nobody told me what to expect. And then it was like, I asked him later, and he said, yeah, it's like shards of energy that he was stepping on and walking. It wasn't on the actual ground. In my mind, I thought I saw him connecting with the sand, but then there was this illogical thing where I know this is a sand. If I put my hand on it, it leaves imprint. He's walking across and there is no footprints.
That is fascinating. That's interesting. After, a few years ago, I would have heard that story and rolled my eyes. And that was just who I was back then. But my mind has been opened to the possibility of all things. And I absolutely believe that the unexplained things that happen may not be explainable by us in our current realm or level of consciousness or education levels that we currently are a part of. But I really believe that there's so much going on out there that we just know nothing about. But even the scientists now say we only can know of 1% of everything that's actually going on at a cellular level, macro level in the universe. It's unreal.
Absolutely. I think that the reason it's not explained because people don't have access to the field. They don't have access to the spirit. They don't have access to the universe. They don't even have access to their subconscious mind. And this kind of events that somebody can do that are not explainable from the physical perspective. But if you have a bigger picture, it's very technical, but it's very explainable. It's just like you take a lighter and you show it to a cave person and you light the light with fire, and they'll say that's magic. They don't understand how it works, but it's definitely explainable very simply, right? So miracles that people call miracles are very explainable and understandable if you know the technology. And that's part of the things that I was learning from him. It's very interesting.
I remember during our conversation we had a few weeks back, I had explained to you that one night I was awakened at 11:30, wide awake, couldn't get back to sleep, didn't have to wake up until like 3:15 the next morning to get ready for work. And I thought, I'm wide awake, I might as well use this time. So I put on some binaural beats, some music that I listened to while meditating or visualizing. And then I don't know how else to explain it. I may seem or sound a little crazy, and that's okay. But I visualized myself popping out of my body and traveling out and zooming out so far that I could see the world like the astronauts describe it. And I zoomed out to see the whole universe, the galaxy we're a part of, and kept zooming out further and further to see that our sun was inside of a cell that was inside of another human body on a much larger scale. And I just kept zooming out and seeing these things so vividly. And you called it astro traveling.
Yes.
Which I don't know much about. And
it's pretty much exactly what you described. You project your consciousness somewhere you would like to be. You imagine it. Imagination is pure magic. That's our connection. And you project your thought. It's like people say, scientists say that the fastest speed is the speed of light. I beg to disagree. I think thought is the fastest, because I could think about a galaxy I cannot even see easily, but I cannot see it yet.
Have you ever thought of someone halfway across the world that you haven't thought about in months, and within 2 minutes they're calling you on the phone?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All the time. Coincidences like that, but they're not coincidences. It's just when you meditate, you become so attuned, you feel the field. You feel what's happening. We're all entangled. Just what scientists say now, which they didn't know before. I am a scientist by nature. I'm very analytical, very rational, very logical. I mean, I designed computer systems, logic, right? But when I lost the train of thought, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Oh, yeah. So what I was saying, what I was talking about, sometimes I just lose.
It'll come to you in a second.
Yeah.
As you were speaking earlier, you spoke about, you were able to examine your work as a mandala and your yogic practice, and you would go in and find solutions that nobody else was really capable of getting to. And there's a physicist named Tom Campbell, who used to do the same thing in the 70s. He began transcendental meditation, and a different type. And he started using it at work. They had the punch cards, that wasn't programming and keyboards and screens back then. They would literally punch holes in cards.
It was before my time, but I remember reading about it.
Yeah, and the computers are as big as a whole room in a house, and
totally and the power of it was tiny. As a whole room, the power was tiny.
And if you to program the computer had a stack of, say, 500 cards, you had to feed them in one at a time, and then that would run the program. It would take days sometimes to figure out one little punch that was off by just a minuscule millimeter. And he said that he would go into meditation at work, and within 5 minutes, visualize where the mistake was, and go right to it and fix it immediately. He was one of the fastest, most efficient workers because of this.
Yeah. I can so relate to that. Absolutely. And you can do the same with reading people, reading situations, knowing whether you should take this path or the other path. But there is something that reminded me exactly what I was going to say. So scientists, I have even though I have this kind of scientific, a bit of a background, I have a little bit of a problem with science. I'll tell you why. Science became kind of like a religion in itself. And if they say, this is scientific, this is according to science, Well, science is a process. It's a process of analysis, elimination, and testing. And then again, analysis, elimination, testing, repeating. Well, if let's say they came to a certain answer to a particular problem, if they didn't have all the variables that affect the situation, they're wrong. I'll just throw one variable in and it will be off. That's it. That's a science. Science is gone. One variable, just like that. So I love science, but I think science needs to merge with spirituality. So it's kind of, again, spirituality and science are two sides of the same pole, right? And I think that what scientists are saying now, like for many, many centuries, we were told that the space is empty. Well, now they're saying, no, it's not empty. It's actually a field. Space bends. So the reason gravity, the reason planets go around a planet or a sun or something like that, the reason we move through space is not because of the gravitational pull of the planet or the sun. It's not because of that. It's because this sun created an impression in the space itself. So imagine like sheet, right? Flat sheet. And you put a ball in it, like this planet. It kind of creates indentation, and that curved space creates that path for the planets to go around. So it's not a magnetic pole of the sun or the planet that holds planets together. It's the space, the curved space that does. So the more science unfolds, the more it comes closer to truth. But we are not there yet, and science is not a religion.
Yeah. Going back to enlightened beings, I remember hearing Dr. Wayne Dyer once talk about how a very small amount of truly enlightened beings in the world would basically tip the scales of the universal scale, tip the balance,
yes,
in a way that balances everything out with so much evil going on in the world and so much destruction and chaos. The very few that are enlightened can sort of balance things all out, and it's sort of all about balance or something like that.
I would kind of agree partially. So I agree that enlightened beings, even though there are only few of them at any one time on the planet, and they're in New Age today, they call everybody enlightened. Somebody who's just had a realization of something and they feel that they're awakened and they're enlightened. I don't view that as enlightenment. But if we're talking about real enlightened beings, they definitely change they support life on this planet, put it this way. Where I deviate from what you mentioned about what he said was that it balances good and evil. From a God's point of view, there is no good and evil. From a God's point of view, everything is God, because there's nothing that isn't God. So there's really nothing to balance.
It's all perfect as it is.
It's all perfect as is, from that kind of objective point of view.
For someone who may be stuck in a state of victimhood or is experiencing
duality,
extreme suffering or going through a painful moment, that's going to be hard to hear for sure.
Very hard. And it's like, how is that not evil? How is this person is not evil? Well, it's not. It's just that this person is unenlightened. That's it. There is lack of light. There is no dark switch. There's only a light switch. There is either light or the absence of it.
Interesting.
And if somebody who is completely evil, probably there was something even in their past lives, maybe in childhood, the way they think, it just took them away from the true knowledge, with true light, true wisdom. And that's why they're so confused, that they're hurting their fellow human beings. So yeah, that's what it is. At least according to Buddhism, we don't believe in evil.
There's so many different ways to try out believing and upgrading beliefs and kind of expanding and opening the mind to new practices.
Yeah.
What are some of the practices or habits or perceptions that you've acquired along the way within your life journey that have empowered you the most?
That's harsh. Probably self-acceptance is one of them, because just like, we all often, like not all, but many people perhaps feel that they are never good enough, that there is something wrong with them, they don't fit in, whatever. And to learn that everything is precious, everything is light, everything is expression of it. So you start to become kinder to yourself, just like you're kind to other people, and accepting yourself as well.
How do you go about doing that, reprogramming the subconscious or consciously becoming more self-accepting and more self-appreciating?
I would say, in my case, I spent time with my teacher and other students who were also of that mindset. So he taught through, like, when you're talking to somebody and you see that they love you completely, they can see right through you. Like whenever I was in his presence, similar to Ramdas' experience, it was impossible to hide anything. If I ask a question and he looks at me, that's it. There is nothing. It's like you're naked completely. There's nowhere to hide. He sees everything about you, every little thought. He knows what you think. So he loves you anyway. He looks at you, he sees all of you, and he still believes in you and supports you and loves you. So I think the best way to accept yourself is, first of all, do what you think is honorable. Because if you do, you will automatically respect yourself more. If, for example, you know that you need to do some work and you need to come through with this project and give it, if you apply yourself to this project, you will feel better about yourself, right? So that's one. And of course, another is surround yourself with people you look up to, especially people who believe in you, people who support you, not the yes people, because my teacher was the first one to point out if I was doing something wrong. In fact, when he would get mad, if he would get mad, hold on to your hat. And I learned, a lot of people felt offended and actually left, but I knew better. I knew that he was displeased with some parts of me. So I let him rip through my energy like the wind. I would just open myself up and let that energy, whatever he was saying, just go right through me. I would just be open to take that cancer away from me, all those thoughts, limitations, whatever you say, just let it rip. Just go for it. I'm fine. I can take it. And that saved me, actually, because I was able to, that's what allowed me to let go of those layers of the onion.
That is so similar to the stories that Ram Dass tells with his guru, Maharaji. So similar.
Yeah, because enlightened teachers, they don't really fool around. If you're not serious, they have other people to talk to, and they won't take you seriously unless you do.
Like, nice,
they
go
will
away.
Give you, they will, exactly, they will give you a chance. They will definitely give you a chance if they are real. If you have karma to be with them, they will give you a chance. Even if you're a beginner, you're learning, just you rough around the edges, everything is wrong, but they give you a chance. But if they gave you enough chance and they gave you homework and you don't come through and you've been lazy, you're going to hear about it.
They already know before you tell them or don't.
Absolutely. I used to receive phone calls like in the middle of the night. wouldn't speak, like I wouldn't see him sometimes for a couple of months, and so we wouldn't have any conversation. I had no idea he knew what I was going through, and he would call me specifically and talk to me about the situation that I never talked to anybody about, that I would have questioned. I was just like be worried, because one thing is interesting. When I started studying with my teacher, I was so happy and I was so fulfilled, and it was so juicy spiritually. In my heart, I feel so at home. I didn't want anything. I didn't want any relationships, because in my early 20s, I developed this pattern of being with someone and losing myself in the relationship. And it's kind of like, and then if the relationship didn't work out, I would be heartbroken for a long time. So I wanted to break that pattern, and I felt so happy where I was. And I said, thank God to all the men who never married me. I was so happy. And then I decided that he never requested, he never required it. I just decided I didn't want to have any relationships at all. I'm done. And for a good 10 years, I was completely celibate. I didn't date anybody. I didn't see anybody. That's it. And then I was in Chicago at the time, and I met somebody, and I fell in love, like, heels over head. And I felt like, oh my God, what am I doing? I purified my body, I purified my mind, and now all I can think about, I just can't get this guy out of my head. I was very frustrated, and I thought I was completely losing it. I lost my path. I was very confused. And so that's when I received that phone call in the middle of the night. And the message was, I know you think you're off your path, that you completely lost it, and you're not doing well. And it's like, no, you're doing spiritually, you're doing better than you have in years. Very unexpected feedback. So he did not reprimand it. He in fact said, you're doing better than you have in a long time.
Which speaks to the life being the yogic practice, bringing the spiritual practice into the here and now, and into a new love interest, or into a new way of being, or, that's fascinating.
Yeah, so it's not like one or the other. It's not like you just have to be celibate, or you need to be in a relationship in order to practice tantra. Not at all. Not at all. You just practice tantra, and whatever comes your way, you deal with that in the best possible way, in a spiritual way, in a dharmic way, as you know.
I love that. In the book, The Four Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz wrote, the fourth agreement was always do your best.
Yeah.
He said, if you always do your best under any circumstance, you'll avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret.
Yes.
He was teaching you that in that moment, like, hey, go easy on yourself. Everything is just as it should be.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful moment.
Self-acceptance, but at the same time, having a very high bar, very high standard for what you're doing. Absolutely.
Which brings us around to part of our last discussion as well, in remembering the future that we wish to expand into. Jason Archer, a good buddy of mine, always says that, remember your future, like visualize exactly where you want to go and who you want to be in this human body, and then take the steps to naturally have the results that will get you there. Intuition plays a big role in the visualization practice, in knowing what you do and don't want, experiencing all the contrast and realizing what you don't want more of, so that you can decide then what you do want more of. Speak to us a little bit about intuition, like when ought we listen to it, and how can we enhance it within ourselves?
Yeah, I personally hold that belief that any desire I need to run by my higher self. Because if I just follow my desire to have something or someone or do something or whatever it is, it may or may not be the highest good for me or everybody else. So before I follow through with visualization and going after whatever it is that I want, I go into deep meditation. And I connect without any prejudice. I drop my desire. I want to step away from whatever I'm looking at in my mind, whatever desire I hold, images, projections. I just want to get rid of all of that and have the clean slate. And when I'm in a deep meditation, I would have that question in front of me, specific question. Would this be a dharma? Would this be the true path for me to have this or do this? I ask that first. When I'm confirmed through my meditation, no matter how much I want something or some whatever, it doesn't matter. I drop that because that desire will confuse my vision. You know what's interesting? In Sanskrit, the word for the seer, you know, somebody who can see in the inner world, is called Savitri. Savitri, in translation, if you translate it directly, is a cold bitch.
Say what now?
Literally, cold bitch. Not that serious.
Okay.
Because you have to be completely detached. You have to be cold in order to see the truth, so that you're not swayed by your emotions. You're not swayed by your desires. You need to be completely detached. So I'm getting into that detached state before I'm looking into what it is that I'm trying to question and see if that's right for me. And if from that objective perspective, I don't care about me personally or whatever situations around, I just drop it, say, is this the path? Is this the right? Is this the dharma? If it is, then I go ahead with visualization, projecting myself in the future and following those steps. But if I get any kind of, maybe it's just my carnal desire, maybe it's not real true, maybe it will take me off the path instead of putting me on the path, in which case I close that book.
Do you sometimes go against what you think you should and then experience feelings or results that immediately give you feedback, letting you know that, hey, I need to realign and go the other way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a part of learning. You know, you do something and then realize, why is it not going so well? Maybe I wasn't even aware of things are kind of not connecting. And then when I look back and I was like, that's where I made a mistake. I was following my desire. I didn't check with myself whether it was right.
That's interesting.
Absolutely.
From what I heard and from what I understood, it's almost like that realignment with true self is an unbecoming of all that we think we are, the who, and an alignment with what we actually are while we inhabit these human bodies. Just the pure love and the energy and the light.
Right. Yes.
That's all I could think of.
And it's incredible solace for people who are going through difficult times. It's when people are going through depression, anxiety, all the negative thinking and mental challenges, mental health issues, to connect with their heart instead of head. So connect the heart chakra with the third eye and focus on the heart primarily, because that will get them in touch with the body and also with the feelings as opposed to the thinking. Thinking mind is like a runaway jumping monkey, busy monkey. But the heart is much wiser. When I was getting ready for my TEDx talk, I was doing a lot of research. And one of the studies, actually multiple studies, but specifically the one I think I reference in the talk, and I don't remember if it was Oxford or forgot, I think it might be Oxford study, showed that the electromagnetical signals from the heart are 5,000 times more powerful than the ones from the brain. 5,000 times. And in fact, when they're doing brain scans. The biggest part of technology equipment is dedicated to filter out the signals from the heart so that they could detect the brain activity.
That is interesting.
Right. So when people are going through really hard time, focusing on the heart, connecting with love, that unconditional love is essential for healing.
For someone who's never even tried to meditate, maybe they're afraid that they might mess it up, or something,
Yeah,
or
right.
maybe they've just never even thought of it before, never heard of it. Is there a short meditation that you'd be able to run the audience through that would get them sort of started down the path of meditation and reconnecting with their true self and opening up that heart chakra and realigning?
Yes, I'm trying to think of how to start a music on my end. It's a special music that I wanted to see if I can figure out. You know what, maybe if that's okay with you, what we can do, maybe we can have a separate
Sure.
podcast
Yeah, of course.
where I can just teach people how to meditate and give them the whole lesson, and with the
awesome.
music, with everything.
Okay.
Right? For now, for today, let's say, focus on your heart. Let's say, put your hand out, like somewhere on the side, close your eyes, and touch yourself in the middle of the chest. Say me,
Me.
automatically touching the heart chakra. And you say me. And now just focus on the feeling in that area. Sit up straight. I never recommend lying down because you will be just too relaxed. Energy won't flow very well and you most likely tend to fall asleep. So you sit up straight, feel very alert with your eyes closed, and you focus on the heart chakra, on that center. You can even hold your finger here for a few minutes and just feel it. And when thoughts come to your mind, just ignore them. Just ignore them. Let them go. No matter what comes in, just drop them and refocus on that feeling and keep bringing yourself back to that feeling for just a few minutes, like 5 minutes or so. And the next time when we get together, I will actually teach the entire lesson of how to meditate, because usually it takes me about an hour and a half to teach meditation.
Well, that would be incredible. It's interesting when you did that, my eyes were closed and all I could visualize is this almost like, how you drop a pebble into water and you got the ripple effects going outward.
Exactly.
It was like love just pulsating outward,
Right, exactly. Well, because you have been doing amazing work for a few years now yourself. And so you're connected with your heart. You're in touch with that. Not everybody who will start focusing on their heart chakra will have that experience from the beginning, but eventually everybody would. As like everybody, it's very learnable, very learnable. So if people just focus on their heart chakra and feel love, feel bliss, feel light, whatever the good feelings, maybe even visualize a little flower, maybe like opening one petal at a time, like a rose, opening in layers and radiating out. So just you can use that visualization, but the most important part is still focus on the center while you're doing it. Don't get caught up in the visuals. Because when I started meditating, there are a lot of visual effects. If I close my eyes sometimes, I feel my body spinning like all the way. I was like, I'm not spinning, I'm opening my eyes, I'm still sitting here. Why am I feeling I'm spinning? It's Kundalini moving.
Wow, interesting.
But you just keep focusing, ignore the visuals, ignore the pretty things. You just focus on the silence. Like, there is this beautiful poem and it's, there is a still point between the turning worlds. So that still point between the turning worlds, whatever the mind goes, all the worlds are spinning, but we focus on that still point in the middle of it, at the center. And you just focus on that one spot, and maybe a lot of thoughts go around, but you don't focus on thoughts, you focus on between the thoughts. not on the breath, but between the breaths.
That's interesting. That's well put. Has there ever been a time in your life where you took a period and stopped meditating to see what it would be like, or have you just always been a meditator since you learned it?
There were times when I would feel really bad, like I would be going through some really difficult time. But if I didn't meditate during that time, if I didn't do my morning hour meditation, I would feel really miserable. I would have to say, I would feel really miserable the entire day. And if I look in the mirror, I was like, why do I look 20 years younger? 20 years older. I was like, I didn't meditate this morning.
That's interesting.
I didn't have many of those days, but whenever I did not meditate, I felt it really badly. So I would say, am I addicted to meditation? Well, can you get addicted to exercise, to healthy food, to water? I guess you can.
Absolutely.
It's a good addiction, though.
There are so many addictions that we can actually replace with other addictions. I've been practicing that for years, and
yeah,
it's interesting how your life experience becomes enhanced in so many ways and optimized beautifully, and how things unfold more easily and beautifully all the time when you replace old habits with new habits and sort of experiment with different ways of being. It's really fun.
Right. It is true.
There's a meditation. I started out with Emily Fletcher's book, Stress Less, Accomplish More. I discovered meditation through Tom Bilyeu. I'd been fighting the idea of doing it for 2 years, and I couldn't meditate because I was like, oh, there's so many ways to do it. What if I mess it up? What if I do it wrong?
Right.
For 9 or 10 chapters of the book, she described how it enhances your life, and scientifically and spiritually, sexually, relationship of its area. Exactly. And then she described a simple 15-minute meditation. And that's where I started. And I've never become a meditator for hours simply because of the strenuous schedule that I do have during most days, and the exhaustion that I have when I come home after a long day. Mm-hmm. However, I do believe that just like with exercise, whether it's 5 minutes, 15 minutes, or an hour a day, anything's better than nothing. I really do believe that.
Absolutely. I agree. So I would never recommend somebody who is just starting to meditate for an hour or hours at all, ever. Not. It's just like, do you want somebody who has never worked out in their life go in the gym for 5 hours
and kill
themselves? They kill them dead. They won't come back. No, it's not. In meditation, it's more important to meditate 15 minutes every day than for 2 hours every other day or every once in a while. Because you need to start putting those holes in that curtain of illusion. And every time you meditate, if you stop thought, you're actually putting the holes in that veil. Wow. So consistency definitely traps the duration. I would say when you never meditated in your life, start with 15 to 20 minutes. When you meditate consistently for months, maybe bring it to half an hour. And then if you meditate consistently for a few months, let's say 5 months, 6 months, whatever, bring it to 45 minutes. And you can stay with 45 minutes for a long time because the quality is much more important, and consistency and quality are more important than the duration. You just focus on the quality, make sure you have less and less thoughts, meaning you're focusing between the thoughts, right? And then maybe after a year or two meditating, and you're meditating 45 minutes, you will automatically not even notice time went by much longer. You look at the clock, so you thought you meditated 15 minutes, 20 minutes, like half an hour, and then it's like, no, it's an hour and a half went by. You don't notice.
You get in a certain state sometimes, I've noticed, where time and space collapse, And
Mhm.
it's all relative, just like Einstein said. You've kind of inspired me. I think I've been wanting to do this for a while, but the video that I watch, East Forest is the music that plays, and then one of Ram Dass's friends is singing in it as well. And then Ram Dass, in his older age, after his stroke, contributed to this meditation. I think it's about 12 minutes, but during that meditation, what's working best for me now, currently, with the very little I know, is I'll do what's called box breathing during the
Mhm.
meditation. And when I breathe in, I do use visualization as a tool. And I basically, for 4 counts, I'll breathe in and breathe in love from all that is, everything outside the universe, within it,
Mhm.
everything from everywhere just sends love into my heart chakra. And then when I'm holding my breath, it's almost like that ripple. It just
Mhm.
expands out forever and just keeps expanding from then on.
Mhm.
And then as I breathe out for 4 counts, I will send love and gratitude to specific individuals. And then when I hold my breath,
Mhm.
I just remain in the calmness and imagine floating in water that is actually love, that is everywhere, and that we are all connected in that water, just like an electric shock, within water. I mean, we're all connected. If we're all both standing in
Mhm.
water and someone gets shocked, so does the other person.
Right.
So I imagine everyone as inextricably connected
Yeah.
forever, whether we want to be or
Right.
not, all as one in this love.
Right.
12 minutes of that, and man, it it hits me hard every day. I love that meditation. So I'm definitely going to make a
Right.
video.
Good.
Um,
Yeah. It's like there's so many different techniques, very many. It's not about technique. It's at different times I practice different techniques, and for different times I teach different techniques. You know, a lot of the techniques, especially that have to do with visualization and breathing, are more of the kind of visualization that kind of you're floating in this astral dimension. So you're getting some energy from it. But we have layers. So let's say there's a physical dimension, there is something that's below physical, but let's not go there. Let's say there is a physical dimension, right? And there is an astral dimension. Astral worlds are going on forever. And those worlds, there are some higher worlds and some lower worlds. And from our physical perspective, we don't necessarily see the differences, especially if somebody wants to manipulate us from the outside. So you have to be careful with that. But if you focus just on light without any, like, sometimes I just go into the light, no differentiation, no images, pure light. Because what happens is it's like a rocket. You bypass all astral dimensions. Visualizations, all of that lives in the astral world, but you go through them out into the outer sphere, into the light, where it's beyond astral dimensions, beyond astral, beyond causal dimensions, which are just the dimensions of pure ideas. You go through without stopping, you just push yourself out and you stay in the light. And that's where you get most of the empowerment. You know, the astral dimensions, higher astral dimensions have some energy, but the pure light, it's like looking into the sun with unarmed eyes.
when you get
Impossible.
there, do you identify with the light? Do you become that light? Do you realign with it?
I drop trying to align or visualize. I just let it do with me as it will.
That's interesting. I want to be respectful of your time. We've been going for about
Oh
an
yeah,
hour and 20 minutes or so.
no
I
worries
can
at all.
go for more if that's okay with you.
It's fine with me. Absolutely. I think we come to this very interesting point of talking about the actual light. You know, that's where the pure treasure is. Most people go treasure hunting in meditation, and they are just at the entrance of it, and they start seeing all those shards of little glass shining here and there, and they start filling their pockets and get stuck there. And it's like, no, Let it go, empty your pockets, go up, go into the light, because that's where the true treasure is. That light is what's going to melt your layers.
That is useful, because I really identified with what you were saying about people that are hard on themselves, who haven't ever loved or accepted themselves. I mean, I had a great life, but because of misperceptions and destructive beliefs that I instilled within myself at a very young age, and then designed a life from them for years and decades, I suffered for years needlessly of my own doing, with self-loathing and self-hatred. Literally just hated myself and everything about me, and could never accept any part of me or appreciate any of it at all. And over the years, I eventually came across content on podcasts and recordings from really great teachers that said, no, it's okay to love yourself, and this is how to do it. You know, set an alarm to go off every day and call it self-appreciation, and brainstorm in your mind at the end of the day what you appreciate about yourself that day, and to fill your being with appreciation and love. It then sort of goes in and pushes out and displaces all that was, you know, all the ugliness and the darkness that was you at one time, and it becomes something totally different.
Right. Yes, I can relate to that completely. I understand. I was bullied very badly when I was young, when I was a child. I grew up in a terrible environment in the hospitals most of my childhood. And I was bullied, and there were my parents weren't there. There was nobody. And so I learned to think that I am the worst. I am not worthy of anything. Nobody will ever love me, ever, because why, you know? And it's very painful when you start meditating. You start to wake up to your own power that you left from past lives. Like when we're here, we only know what we know here now. But when you start meditating, you start getting access to the part of you that actually incarnates from lifetime to lifetime. You know, the brain didn't exist before we were born, this brain, so it can't remember. But if we go beyond the brain into meditation, we start to get connected with the deeper mind part of us that does incarnate. That's when we start to remember our lives. And so start to come up with your own power. You start to remember that you have a very noble heart, that you're a truth seeker, that the reason you feel so bad about yourself actually is because you are a good person. Most people who are rotten, they don't question their quality and their value. They love themselves in a most egotistical way, right? Mm-hmm. So they don't question, they don't think that they are, you know, don't deserve. They think they deserve everything without giving anything. So just the fact that you feel unworthy maybe points to, unless you were, of course, conditioned by some church that told you that you're a sinner. But if it wasn't the case, then it's usually because you know that there is more to be, more to aspire to. That's why you don't feel satisfied with the way you are right now, because you know, intuitively, you know that there is so much more to your experiences, could be experiences. And so this dissatisfaction is what pushes you forward.
Oh man, I was so dissatisfied. That hit me hard, because when I started meditating, and I never put this together until you were saying that I felt like I was realigning with my true self, my true nature, the being inside of this body that is that. I mean, I look in the mirror now and I'm like, that's just a body. That's not actually what I am. You know, that's just who I identify as temporarily.
Yes.
And that's fascinating. You know, meditation, I just can't speak enough about that topic. And honestly, I'm just scratching the surface. I mean, people like you who have studied under someone like you did. I mean, I don't know that I've ever met a truly fully enlightened being. I will say, and give credit to my wife, that she has taught me what unconditional love and non-judgment is. And I've never experienced that from anyone in my life ever. Not my
Right.
own family or friends, nobody. Church
Understandable.
leaders, and
Yeah.
she has shown me unconditional love. Now, it's not to say that if I do something that is out of alignment with our personal relationship agreements, that she wouldn't just pack a bag and leave or kick me right on out,
Yeah.
and those are called boundaries, and that's healthy. But the love that she has for me is something like I've never experienced before. And it's taught me to
Right.
do that for myself.
Absolutely. I've heard recently on one of the podcasts that somebody who loves you unconditionally, it they that doesn't mean if you break these boundaries and agreements, they may pack their bags, meaning that they won't necessarily stop loving you at a deep level, but it doesn't mean that they will stay in the relationship.
Because they know how to love themselves as well.
Right. Hopefully. Yes.
And I think people that love and appreciate and accept themselves progressively and methodically design a life with healthier and healthier boundaries. They're always upgrading.
Right.
And that's part of the secret to enhancing the life experience, really.
Yeah. I'm just careful because there is something, life isn't linear. And when we say love ourselves, like I want to love myself, something is and isn't true at the same time. On the one hand, I recognize the value of respecting myself and loving myself in a way. But at the same time, when I say I love myself, I create kind of artificial separation between myself and myself. I am, it's like, how can I love myself? If I love myself, I'm just fully in light. That's how I express my love for myself. Everybody is different. I've heard this phrase in the New Age communities lately: you have to love yourself. You have to love yourself. I agree with that and disagree with that at the same time. I think we need to respect ourselves. I think we need to have boundaries, healthy boundaries. But to separate, I love myself, there's some kind of incongruity there a little bit for me.
Well, one thing I was interested to ask you about that we hadn't discussed before was, we all know there's drugs out in the world, and some of these drugs were labeled dangerous by government entities and different countries. But there are some drugs out there that are considered by many communities as plant medicine.
Right.
Down in the Amazon, they mix different things like leaves and tree bark to make ayahuasca teas and
yes,
psilocybin, the mushrooms, that so many people
DMT, psilocybin, ayahuasca. Yes.
Did your guru ever teach you about any of these things?
No, because first of all, they are not legal, right? Second, he didn't need them. I never took them myself. I'm kind of virgin in that sense. So I tried cannabis since it's been legal in the past couple of years for sleep, but I take it as a tincture, not as a smoke. I can't smoke for my lungs. It just doesn't work for me.
And with COVID, it doesn't make sense at all to start smoking,
absolutely.
right?
No. So I just been taking some of the tinctures to help me to sleep. And primarily I found helpful Delta 8, not just THC, but Delta 8 from hemp. It helps me to sleep without getting me losing my short-term memory and feeling weird in the morning. None of that happens if I just use Delta 8. But as far as plant medicines and meditation and what my teacher was talking about, so he had so much power. People who did take LSD, for example, and other drugs before they met him, they would share with me their experiences, and they said, oh, you're not losing, you didn't miss anything, because what you experience here in his presence is like that. It's like being on LSD. You see all these colors, you see unusual things. You arrived there through the method of meditation, not through plant medicine. So here is my personal perspective on drugs after studying with him and hearing his perspective that you really don't need them, right? They can open your mind in some ways. In some cases, somebody who is really dense here, for example, when Carlos Castaneda was studying with Don Juan Matias in the, his books, he describes his journey there. And Don Juan was giving him plant medicines. He was giving them to Carlos because Carlos was a bit thick. He wasn't getting it. The other person that Don Juan was teaching was Carlitos. And Carlitos didn't need those plant medicines because he was much more open. He had those experiences without plants, but Carlos needed the plants, right? So not everybody needs them. But my personal perspective on this plant medicines, working with people with PTSD, working with people who have various mental challenges, mental health issues. If you have completely unstable mind, you should not do any of the plant or psychedelic medicines ever, because you need to be very stable in order to do them. If your mind is not stable, it can be dangerous. It truly can be, unfortunately, but it can be.
Because life is dangerous when you're unstable.
Life is dangerous. That's true. But think of it this way. Think of a flower, the way the bud develops. And it gradually gains the juices and strength. It starts to gradually open to the sun, but it opens to the sun through its own volition, through its own muscle, right? Strength. It opens. So when the evening comes, it gets cold, the flower can close the petals again and it opened up again in the morning, right? What happens with drugs? If you develop your mind to open to the astral experiences and the world through meditation, you develop that strength within you. So you open yourself up to those worlds like I had, but then I can close them down. I don't have flashbacks. I can open and I can close. What happens if somebody who hasn't done this kind of spiritual work, meditation work, focused, maintaining very precise focus, they would have drug experience, ayahuasca, for example, or psilocybin, whatever, and they would open themselves up, right? Not everybody's experience are positive. Some people who had a lot of trauma in their life, they could be thrown back into these very powerful, dark experiences, scary, very scary. Because what? The truth is only blissful to the ones who are ready to hear it. Otherwise, the truth, the person will run away from it. They will run away screaming. It's scary. When you show somebody in a really distorted state of mind, if you put the mirror in front of them, they will get scared of their own image, right? Their own reflection.
Or if you're in a purely dark room for months and then all of a sudden all kinds of lights are turned on, it's almost like catching on fire.
Terrifying, yeah. And they could be spinned out into this very dark, very scary experiences because they didn't develop their mind. They will not necessarily be able to walk away from that experience without flashbacks. It might pursue them. And that's how some people actually lose mind when they have these experiences. So it cannot be taken lightly. Yeah. You know, you have to prepare yourself spiritually. You have to do the work, a lot of self-work, learn to focus and clear yourself of all medications, especially mental medications, any SSRIs, any antidepressants, anti-anxiety, all of that has to be gone completely for like a few months before you can attempt to do the plant medicine. Because sometimes the plant medicine could increase the effect of the medication to the point where it would be poisonous, or it could completely negate it. And if you need that medication, it also is bad news. Yeah. So I would be very cautious with plant medicines. You need to know what you're doing. I would only do it as part of the spiritual ceremony with knowledgeable shamans. Make sure the shamans are not just marketers, because there are plenty of them,
I've heard
right?
that.
We don't want that. One shaman can ruin your life, because under the influence of ayahuasca or some substance that takes you out of your body, if they put some kind of ill will in you because they're jealous or they want something from you, they will drain you for the rest of your life. So you have to be very careful.
Spiritual realm, a light realm of some kind. Yeah,
absolutely.
I've heard
So you
that.
need to be very, very careful who you would go on this adventure with, who you would be guided by. Absolutely, that's critical. So I think that these experiences could be very healing, very awakening for the right people. But it's not a blank statement that it's right for everybody at all. Yeah. Or even for the same person at different times of life, in life, it can be right, it could be not right. So you have to know what you're doing when you're doing it.
You know, a few years ago, my wife and I watched a documentary on YouTube. It was called The Truth About Reality. And one of the actresses from the Fast and the Furious saga, you know, she was in it. And she went up to South America, or down to South America, whichever way you want to look at it, and with some other people. And she describes her experience, and it's worth watching if you're interested at all in learning about
what's
ayahuasca.
The name of it? Yeah, what's the name of it?
The Truth About Reality.
Okay, I will check it.
It might be The Reality About Truth. However, it's one of those.
Okay.
But in there's a man that lived a fast life. He was a multimillionaire, had all the nice cars and the women.
Oh yeah.
And, you know, and he had it. He was winning the game of life. And he went and did an ayahuasca experience because one of his friends was doing it. And he thought, yeah, that might be kind of cool. He had an experience where he revisited some trauma when he was 3 that he never even thought of once or remembered until that experience. And it completely altered him. He ended up, his name is Jerry. He ended up going down to Costa Rica, opening a very fancy, posh kind of ayahuasca center with some great shamans and classes. And it's like a week-long thing. And it's fairly expensive. And I know some people that have gone there and they've tried it out. And I've never heard of any destructive or disempowering or bad negative experiences from any of the people that I've spoken with.
That's good.
Aubrey Marcus has a great podcast, and he's been doing it for years and years. He started with psilocybin, with the little magic mushrooms, you know, and Paul Stamets has been on Joe Rogan a few times on his podcast.
I watched both of them.
Aren't they fabulous?
They are. Absolutely fabulous. I love both of them. I love Joe Rogan, outspoken, and he's always admitting, hey, I am an idiot, right? Whatever, moron, whatever he calls himself. He's not, but he's very sincere in his questioning and his curiosity. He talks to all kind of different people. I really respect that. And Aubrey Marcus is always inspiring, and all his journey on his psychedelic journeys as well.
For sure. There's another podcast I was just introduced to from his show a couple of weeks ago, and it's on YouTube as well. It's called Deja Blue, BLU.
Yes, I've seen it as well. Yeah.
She is something else.
She's great.
I heard her sing on his podcast, and I was like, oh my gosh, I got choked up at work crying like a little, you know. And I was like, why am I so emotional? What's going on here? And so I followed her as well. She's so
connected with her heart. Yes, I do too. She's wonderful. Yeah.
And isn't it interesting too? I mean, the more you sort of realign with your true identity, and the more you meditate, the more you expand into the light, the easier it is to unbecome everything you thought you needed to be worthy of people's acceptance and love. And truly, you know, the only acceptance and love that will fill the holes that got poked in us when we were kids and throughout our whole life is found within us ourselves.
Right. You know, there is the most powerful, the most popular mantra in Tibet, in Buddhist Tibet, is Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. If you literally translate it from Sanskrit, it means jewel in the heart of the lotus. That's a literal translation. What it actually means, symbolic, what it means is God is within you. Om Mani Padme Hum.
Interesting.
Jewel in the heart of the lotus, God is within you.
The first time I heard that was actually during one of Ram Dass's many recordings on the Be Here Now network. They have hundreds and hundreds of hours, like over 15,000 hours of recordings from Ram Dass, and I'm just starting to scratch the surface.
Yeah.
So that's what that means. That's lovely. And isn't that interesting, that if we're able to, and I don't want to seem sacrilegious to people who are, of a certain type of religion or anything. I'm not trying to be disrespectful at all, but to re-identify ourselves, our true selves, not this human form, but the light within as divinity, as something divine, that it feels right.
To me, that's self-love. That's how I view self-love. If I feel I'm a child of God, if I feel that I'm connected to that infinite love, that's to me is self-love. Gorging on cheesecake isn't necessarily self-love.
That's enjoyable in this human form, but
it's
agreeable.
Enjoyable.
That's not.
In a moment it is enjoyable. The next week, if I eat it every day, probably won't be enjoyable. Like when I can't get into my favorite dresses.
That's funny.
Like, what did I do?
I have a sister that I'm really close to. And years ago, I became a newly single dad for a time. And I had 3 young boys, and I was devastated by the loss of a relationship, with their mother. And I was just starting over, and I was lost, and I was severely depressed and anxious, suicidal. And she looked at me and she kind of snapped me back into reality with what she said. She goes, I'm going to tell you something that a woman told me that helped me a lot. And it was, if you're okay, those kids are going to be okay. They don't learn by what you're telling them. They're observing to learn. And everything you do, they'll learn from that. So you need to be okay. I went out that day and joined the gym, started taking better care of myself and giving them better examples of ways to be. So that was useful.
Very much so, yes. So self-love is taking care of yourself so that your children will understand what self-love is, right? And how to care about themselves, because they see how you care for yourself, and how to love by knowing that you pretty much sacrifice your misery and chose to be in the light so that they can see it.
I'm going to get really honest and raw and truthful and describe a past version of myself that was very shattered and broken and not that great. After that divorce, I was with their mother for 12 years. After that divorce, I dragged them literally through a couple dozen relationships. Every 6 months on average, we moved in and out of different homes. And I recognized later in life, obviously now, that I was basically trying to distract myself from the extreme emotional turmoil and chaos within,
Right.
And they loved me through all that when I couldn't even love myself. And so I have a lot of respect and love and gratitude for my 3 sons, for sure. And my family, my God, they were so supportive, and no reason to be. They could have said like, ugh, he's a lost cause long ago, but they never did. I'm so fortunate.
That's beautiful. And, just a word for when you try to distract yourself, there is something that my teacher used to say, and I think you might, and other people may find it useful. He used to say, cravings are the muse of the unhappiness.
You say that again?
Cravings are the muse of the unhappiness. When we're unhappy, we start crave things because that would distract us from dealing with what we need to deal with at the moment. So when we're unhappy, we have all kind of cravings, and that's why marketers always show us the pain, right? So that you don't think of how happy you are. You think, oh, I need something. So you're hurting, and then you have a desire. So cravings are the muse of the unhappiness. When you're happy, you don't crave anything.
I've found that to be absolutely true in my life, for sure.
So it's true, I think, for everybody. Just like you said, you were hooking up with different people and having many relationships because they were distraction, right? Are we all guilty of it? Whether it's shopping therapy or anything else, it's pretty much that. Either or somebody is going around and having many different partners, variety. They're just distracting themselves from life, from dealing with what they really need to work on.
Yeah. Wow. It's interesting. It wasn't until 2014, from the year 1999 until 2014, I was on, over 20 different antidepressants I had tried. Depakote, Depakine, lithium, major mood stabilizer. It basically deadens you chemically so that you're empty. You don't feel anything.
I'm very familiar with that. Yes.
Those things put me
absolutely.
to sleep.
Yes. And I'm familiar with them too, because I also went through depression. I was diagnosed with depression when I was 8 years old because I was bullied and I was away from home. And I had a few suicide attempts. I definitely lived with the suicidal thoughts since I was 7 or
that
whatever
is
age.
so young.
And when I was in the United States, the doctors did put me on different medications and I couldn't stand them. I couldn't be on them. I felt like I don't feel anything. I'm dead, like flatlined completely. And I refused taking them. So I tried all those medications you just mentioned, not all of them, but definitely a few of those you mentioned throughout my life. But every time, no more than I took for maybe a week, I was like, I'm not taking that. Done. And I'm dealing with people in my work, working with people who have depression, anxiety, and some serious bipolar, whatever disorders might be. Chemicals took over their brain. So when they really down on themselves and talk really negative about themselves and talk about suicide or things like this is not your mind talking. Your mind is fighting chemicals from those medications. Really, that's what's happening. And has nothing to do with you, has nothing to do with your mind. It's just that they alter the chemistry of your brain. Depression in itself, I was depressed because I did not know my path. And I felt I don't fit in here. I don't feel connected to these people around me. There was to a large extent, the reason I convinced my parents to leave the country. And I know that depression in itself is not enemy. It shows that there's something wrong with your life. Look into it. Sometimes you might be going through the dark night of the soul, and that's the depression that you interpret it as depression. It doesn't need medications. You shouldn't run away from that pain. You actually need to look into it and say, why am I depressed? The explanation that there is a chemical imbalance, I completely reject that. Chemical imbalance and depression are symptoms. They're not the cause. They're symptoms of you knowing that you're not living your life to your fullest potential. You're not fulfilling your purpose. That's why you're depressed. Often, not always, but often, right? And so medication is definitely not the right way to go. For some people, it might. I don't know everybody. Only talking about people I've been working with. And I see that in most cases, medications are making them sick. And in fact, with a couple of my clients right now. We're looking into going into complete detox, residential detox facility from pharmaceuticals.
Yeah. Big Pharma
And
would disagree with everything you just said. Absolutely. Trillionaires
absolutely,
that they are, right?
I'm sure. Well, and that's why I don't want to get legal medical license or therapy license, because I don't want to be part of that system. I'm not.
Yeah.
I have my own judgment, working with this enlightened teacher for 15 years, working with people for so many years now. I don't really care what they think. I know what I see. And for some people, these medications are still working, and that's fine, but not for everybody. And I insisted that these people would go through this residential detox program, because when the doctors told them that there is no such thing, I said,
there is. I know for a
there
fact.
is,
Yeah.
for a fact, because just like their detox from opioids, which are pharmaceuticals primarily, I am sure there's the same process could be used, or similar process under observation in patient care, to clear out from all the chemicals, all the pharmaceutical medications that are for mental health. And once they clear it out, I think the program, as I know now, is 3 months. Once they clear it out, and depending on how they're doing, and if they're fully in control of their mind, they're balanced, they're stable, they're meditating, then we will look into plant medicine. Then we will look into psilocybin ayahuasca.
Oh, meditation first, for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's number one. Well, they meditate already now, but because of those chemicals, because of the medications, it still creates the problem.
I
Not the
really, really
meditation,
wish.
but medicines. Yeah.
Had I come across meditation as a young boy, that would have been so useful and effective. I know it would have. And I really wish that they taught it in schools everywhere. I really do.
Well, they kind of start doing it now a little bit, but don't feel regret, because now you wouldn't understand people who go through what you're going through. And
That's
I'm
true.
sure people in your community, just like in mine, understand. We understand them because we went through that. I went through depression, anxiety. I went through suicidal thoughts for years. So we understand them, and they know that. So we would not be useful if we wouldn't have that experience ourselves.
You're so right. And I truly now finally can honestly say I have no regrets. You know, all those relationships I went through, I literally benefited from every single one of them in some way, truly. And I can go back and list every person and everything I got from them that was so useful in the here and now, and in raising my children better. And my third wife, before we were separated and divorced, she looked at me one day and said, "Look, in 15 years, have these medications ever once helped you?" And I'd never been asked that question, never thought about it. I was asleep for 15 years, literally.
Yeah.
Devoid of all feeling.
They take away your willpower. They take away your willpower and hope, everything.
Yeah. And she actually found some people at church that turned her on to the possibility of natural remedies. And there was a company in Canada, still is, it's called True Hope. And the man who invented this particular, it's a capsule with all natural vitamins and minerals, called like Q96 and Power Plus is what it was at the time. And he designed it as a chemist that he is, because he lost his wife and his daughter to suicide. And he knew certain things from his experiences and his education that empowered him to strategically implement certain things to give people in their gut microbiome, chemically, hormonally, things that sort of realign them chemically and hormonally. And I've been taking that since 2014, and I love it. And when I was transitioning from those severely hardcore medications,
How did you transition from them? This must be really hard.
I started by going to my psychiatrist and told him my plan. And I asked him what he suggested to taper off of them, or should I just cold turkey it? And he
Yeah,
flipped his lid, lost his mind, started screaming at me, swearing, and told me to get out of his office. And I was like, whoa, I needed help. I didn't come here to be abused. He said, don't ever come
yeah,
back to me if you're not going to do exactly as I say and stay on these meds.
yeah.
I won't help you.
That's exactly how they operate. Yeah.
So I called True Hope, and one of the operators that answered the phone, I said, look, this is what happened. I don't know what to do. I know I need to detox and get off these, but every time I try, within a few days,
Uh-huh.
I'm super noise sensitive. I become an angry,
Yeah,
overreactive, explosive person. And they said, okay, here,
absolutely.
they said, try this. Go to the vitamin store and get the amino acid pill form. Like, they look like a horse pill, you choke on just one of them. They said, take
Wow.
4 times the allotted dose every day for 2 months as you are going off these meds. And they had me taper off them and call in with them and check in with them. And they have
Wow.
people to help,
Phenomenal.
on the phone.
Yeah.
I don't
So what's
recommend that to anybody. I mean,
yeah,
that's just what worked for me.
right. That's phenomenal. Yeah, because I know people right now who I work with. I want to take them off these medications, but of course I want it to be done right in the clinic.
Mhm.
I'm not
Yeah.
a medical doctor,
Yeah.
so I wouldn't. I know what needs to be done, but the actual how for them to do it, I delegate it to the professionals.
Yeah.
So, but
And how
it's
many of
good
those
to know.
professionals would actually
Oh
help them
yeah,
taper off and get off of it, rather than saying, no, you
yeah.
still need to be on it?
It took me 6 months for this client to convince their doctor that they need to actually detox. It's ridiculous. Like 6 months for the first time, they finally listened to him. It's like, well, yeah, there is an inpatient clinic, like residential clinic for detox. And it's like, gosh.
I've learned from medical doctors on many different podcasts that big pharma is the major contributor to almost all of the schools that medical students graduate from.
Hmm.
Go try and put that
Yeah,
together now. I mean,
yeah,
they fund them, tell them what to teach the doctors, and then the
yeah,
doctors are programmed to do certain things.
I see. Wow, that's very sad. It's very
Interesting.
sad. I have a deep respect for Western medicine when it comes to surgeries, when it comes to mechanical fixing. But when it comes to healing, no. I like Western medicine for diagnosis, not all of it, but the ones that are physically obvious, and for surgeries. But when it comes to healing, I don't rely on them.
I just got a book last week from John Sarno, Sarno. He's an MD. Came
Uh-huh.
across a presentation of his. He's passed away a few years back, but one of his books is called The Divided Mind.
Yeah,
Basically, this man, as a medical doctor for 50
I
years, he's a
just
pain
listened to him.
specialist.
Yeah, he's
Incredible
great.
stuff, right?
He is, yes.
95% recovery rate for all patients, no matter what kind of physical trauma they come to him with. That's
There we go.
fascinating.
That's fascinating.
So Bruce Lipton, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and Greg Braden are three individuals that I love to learn from. And what I've
Mm-hmm.
learned from them is we can take back our power to be involved in the creation of our inner chemistry,
Yes.
the chemical cocktail that is constantly flowing and being injected into our bloodstream from our brain, from areas
Right.
around the heart, from the gut, is literally dictated by the thoughts that we think. They
Yes.
correlate with the feelings we feel and that chemical cocktail that's moving throughout the body. So a gratitude practice, anytime we're
Yeah.
in disarray or in an anxious state, we can meditate, we can
Yeah.
have a gratitude practice.
Right.
Are there any other tools that may enhance
Yeah.
that chemistry?
Well, there is also a reverse effect. If you have a really bad biome and you don't have any good bacteria in your gut, you will have negative thoughts no matter what you try.
Oh, wow.
So, you need to focus on healing your gut and
Wow.
healing those good bacteria, because most of our good endorphins and serotonin actually come from our gut, not from the brain, majority of it. So our gut influences our thoughts. We think we influence our gut, but it's actually the other way around. And if you do it in both directions, understanding it, using positive thoughts and affirmations and gratitude, but at the same time, healing your microbiome in a big way, the combination of it will help. Also, when we take all these medications, especially mental health medications, or even the blood pressure medications and all of that, they affect our chemistry, including our gut. They kill the good bacteria. So they make us depressed even just because they kill our gut bacteria.
That is interesting. You know, Tom Bilyeu has another podcast called Health Theory. And on there, he's had so many doctors. I know you've listened to a lot of them. Perlmutter, Dr. Mark Hyman. These are people I've been following, and they say the exact same thing. And the new science and the research coming out backs up every word you just shared. And I'm so glad you brought that up. I totally forgot about how important that truly is.
So important. It's critical. So find out to make sure you're not allergic to anything, because that's important. And eat real food, eat real whole food, because everything, like you pick up a vegetable, every vegetable has its own microbiome. And whatever you take in either agrees with your gut bacteria or it doesn't.
That's so true.
When we take something in a pill form, there is really no bacteria, there is no microbiome in it. So it's not as effective. Better to have the whole foods, but also make sure you take some good probiotics. So that's important. Prebiotics are mostly food, especially vegetables, especially the vegetables that have a lot of fiber. What kills bacteria are things like grains, sugar, sweeteners, artificial sweeteners, other than something natural like stevia leaf. And if you take 100% just stevia, it's okay to sweeten something with that. But anything especially including corn syrup, any of that, it kills your microbiome completely. So any of the crackers, pizza, bread, all of those pastries, sugar, it kills the bacteria inside the gut and it makes you depressed. On top of it, it makes you fat because
it causes more depression.
It basically, if you eat that kind of a diet, it kills your bacteria, but it also creates the inflammation of the liver. The liver becomes fatty liver. That's why people have big bellies, beer bellies, because beer is from grains, and it has a lot of gluten and all the grain protein there. Basically, it just kills your bacteria in the gut.
In 2000,
go ahead.
In 2014, when I was tapering off those medications and all this, I literally recognized that my diet was sodas. Had some kind of a pastry every single day. And I started to learn some more, and I was thinking more clearly. I was off those meds, and I had my brain back, my mind. I could actually critically think. And so I started listening to some podcasts and reading up on healthy practices. And I altered my diet so extremely. And the main thing that helped wasn't, it was a documentary called Fed Up. So I had just started driving cab as a job because they would let me work one day a month and they wouldn't fire me as long as I worked at least one day a month. And my health was so poor that I would ride a bicycle to work and work for 12 hours, go home throwing up from the pain because I had ruptured discs in my spine. And within a few months, I had started to learn some new things, begin new practices. And I remember one day, this man in the back of my cab, he was very brutal with me. And
Mhm.
it was a gift. I really needed
Uh-huh.
this. I didn't want to hear what he had to say. And I was very bitter towards him and actually kicked him out of my cab eventually. We got into it verbally. I said, no, you're going to find another ride, pal. Get out. What he told me was, hey, you look like you're in pain. You okay? And I'm like, no. And I started going on and on about my back, this and that. And I ruptured discs and it's a lot of pain. You're right. He said, well, I see you're drinking a soda. I'm like,
Mhm.
actually, I switched to Gatorade and Powerade because, I was
Much
told the
better.
commercials, the commercials told me, hey, this is good for you. He goes, what are you, stupid? I'm like, whoa, hey, man, we don't know each other like that. He goes, no, I'm not trying to be offensive, but there's more
Yeah.
sugar in that than soda. What are you thinking? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he goes, look, do yourself a favor, go home and watch Fed Up. And at the time, it was on Netflix.
Mhm.
They've long since taken it off. It was very effective in retraining my thinking process and my education about sugar. I
Mhm.
ended up cutting sugar out of my diet completely the day
Good.
after I watched it. But
Yeah.
I went through withdrawals and I didn't know what it was. I went to the doctor at the end of 2 weeks, couldn't stop throwing up. I had massive headaches. And I was like, I don't know if I have cancer. I don't know what's going on. And they asked me a
Withdrawal
bunch of
from sugar.
questions. Yeah. They said
Yeah.
people have died from going cold turkey off sugar. What were you thinking? And I'm like, I didn't know. I just wanted to get off the sugars.
Wow. They just didn't do it right.
Yeah, yeah. And going cold
They,
turkey off the amount of sugar that I was on, it was painful. It was so
right. Yeah.
painful. But for a year and a half
It's
straight, I did that. And within 6 months, I had a six pack for the first time in my life. I lost over 35 pounds. Just,
there we go.
oh, it was amazing. My
Yeah.
sons, they were all like, what are you doing, Dad? I'm on board. Tell me what to do. I want to be like that, And it was
Good.
a source of pride. I'd learned something, implemented it, got the results, and I thought, wow,
There way to go.
yeah. If it
So
works, why not keep doing it, right?
absolutely. That's yeah. I read the book by Michael Colgan, who was nutritionist for U.S. Olympic teams. It was a long time ago. In '95, I got that book because I couldn't figure out how to control my weight, how to just be healthy. I was athletic my whole life, but I could not control my weight. And suddenly I was fed up myself. And I picked his book, and it was an amazing book. And it's exactly that. It's getting rid of sugar, getting rid of all the processed carbs, all the grains. If you want to be healthy completely, focus on getting energy through fats and supplements as well.
Healthy
So, right,
fats. Yeah.
healthy fats. Yeah, well, what's healthy fats? Healthy fats in my book, again, my book, I'm not pushing it on anybody,
Yeah, sure.
but in my book, it's grass fed animals fat. I'm not vegetarian. I'm not vegan. I tried it for 6 years and I gained tons of weight because I wasn't eating enough protein. I was picking up on a lot of sugar and grains, and I just could not manage with that. So, grass fed, organic meat, whatever, seafood, fish, vegetables, all of that is great. Plus, a lot of probiotics and a lot of probiotics. So I'm not allergic to dairy. A lot of people are, but I'm not. So I love cheese. I love kefir, which is fermented dairy
Yogurt
product, but
drink.
it's all organic, unsweetened, plain, full fat, no low fat ever anymore. Butter, grass-fed butter, and I drink kefir before I go to sleep at night. Especially because I do take cannabis to help me to sleep. The tinctures, so the kefir helps me to kind of smooth the lining of the stomach for it. And also, sauerkraut has a lot of fermented vegetables, bottom line, fermented vegetables, and anything that is in this kefir that works. That's really good. If somebody is allergic completely to dairy, completely allergic to whatever, I don't know, anything that I have mentioned, they can still have the sauerkraut, they can still have fermented vegetables, and they can still buy the prebiotics, probiotics in as a pill format. Just make sure that they're alive, that they're not just in a generic section of the grocery store somewhere by a reputable brand. Make sure that it's really
keep them alive
reputable.
in the refrigerator.
Keep them alive in the refrigerator for sure. Right. So you can still do that even if you're a vegetarian or whatever.
Have you ever tried intermittent fasting or the keto plan?
Love it. I am on keto right now because what I'm describing is keto.
I love keto.
I love
is
keto.
Miserable for me until I'm in ketosis, and then it is so
exactly.
easy.
And if I want to get myself a treat and have a cheesecake, I have 3 days a little bit more challenging after that.
For reals.
For sure. But intermittent fasting, I swear by it. I love it. Combination of keto and intermittent fasting are the best in my books.
You know, my mother's been doing keto and intermittent fasting for a couple of years now, and I am just, wow, I'm so blown away. The mental clarity, the alignment with true nature, divinity, the ability to remain younger and not age so quickly. I mean, she is like the epitome of health and wellness, and it helps mentally, it helps physically, and it's been a beautiful experience just to watch her do it, and it's inspired me a few times. I'll go off of it intermittently throughout the year and then back on, and like at work they'll have a weight loss challenge, and I'm like, okay, I'll go on keto, and bam, lose 25, 30 pounds within a month or two.
I understand.
And everybody's like, how? And I'm like, keto, do your research, go try it out, man. Trust me, it's awesome. Yeah, it's magical. It is.
Well, I gained quite a bit of pounds with pandemic. I have to say, I gained lots of pounds.
I think we all have.
Well, I'm talking about 35 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about a lot. And only in the past 3 to maybe 5 months, I started to get back to shape. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the past couple of years have been devastating.
Isn't it a gift, though, to go from one extreme to kind of the other, and the pendulum swings? It shows you what you need more of.
Yeah, because, I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't go to the gym. I couldn't go to my yoga class. I was pretty much locked inside. Was even like, even if I go outside for a walk, wearing a mask, and I was, every time somebody would walk by, I'm afraid to breathe in. I'm afraid to breathe out, even with the mask. So it just was movies and pigging out takeouts, whatever, and eating things that like pins of ice cream that I haven't in a very long time. And of course,
I've noticed too that the sugar, once I reintroduce sugar into my life after keto, especially in the first month, I feel inflamed. I notice a difference. My brain is pressing against the skull.
Inflammation, yes.
I feel those dark thoughts come back. And I'm like, what in the heck? Just from diet alone. My hands won't close all the way.
Because sugar kills the bacteria, the gut bacteria. That's why.
And causes that inflammation.
When your gut bacteria is not happy, you're going to get bad thoughts.
Most people don't realize too, or know this, but the stomach lining is one cell layer thick. It is made to absorb things so quickly.
Exactly. And if you have sugar in your diet, you will get leaky gut, meaning that one cell membrane that separates the intestines is going to start having holes in it. And you start to leaking the matter in your body, and toxic. It's toxic.
And one of the results of that, a sure way to know that you have leaky gut is when you've got acid reflux and it's coming back up and you've been damaged, and it is possible to repair that. You just cut sugars and carbs out and start eating clean, and there's ways to fix the body.
And get a lot of probiotics,
Because they've all been killed by then.
That's right. And if somebody is sick, for example, and they're taking antibiotics for a while, go heavily, like after just a few days, like first couple of days on antibiotics. After that, take tons of probiotics, tons.
Yeah. So I've got to give a shout out to my wife and our kids. We've got a daughter and a son-in-law and a grandbaby living with us, and they're not using Wi-Fi right now or watching Netflix or doing anything but spending time together, so that I was able to eat up the bandwidth to do this
Nice.
with you. So I love
Oh,
them so
that's
much. They're so supportive. That's a big ask, and I really appreciate you guys. For
that's
anyone
wonderful.
who is still listening to this podcast, it's almost 2.5 hours in. We are going to end it. Your sick mind fascinates me if you've gotten this far. And if you're like me, I know that you'll probably listen to this one again and again, take notes, try some different things out. I always tell, it's so important to experiment with everything possible. We're all unique individuals, and what works for one may not work for another, but what's working for someone is worth trying out. And Mila, I know how well meditation has worked for you. You're a very bright, beautiful soul, and I really appreciate you taking your valuable time out to spend it with me and with us here on the Good Net podcast today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pete. It's my pleasure. It's my honor. I'm really glad to have this time with you.
For those who want to connect with you, what are the best ways for them to reach out?
They could reach out to me through my website, miladiamond.com, and there will be connect or contact. There is a page for that.
Great.
I think it's called /book Mila Diamond, but if you just click on contact, it will take you there. And another way, of course, I'm on Facebook, Mila Diamond, and on Instagram at mila.diamond.tedx.coach.
Awesome. And again, I'll link in the YouTube podcast show notes that TEDx talk so that people can check it out. It's short, it's very insightful and informative. And I just really appreciate the person that you have become and the true identity that you know you truly are, and how you are so connected with so many, and you've empowered and helped so many people over the years. And I just say, keep going, keep doing what you're doing. It's awesome.
Thank you so much, Pete. And you too, please continue your work, because I'm sure a lot of people benefiting from it.
I hope so. I really love doing it, and it's a lifelong practice for me now. It's almost like I'm addicted to it because of the inner chemistry and the inner peace that it provides me when I do it, as opposed to when I don't.
Right.
Now, as we're finishing, I do want to say my work has quarantined me because we've got someone in the household who tested positive for COVID, who is doing incredibly well despite that, which I'm grateful for. I don't go back to work till the 29th of the month.
Mm.
And so if you would like to get together in between now and then and do, like you said, an 1.5 hour long podcast on a meditation or different things.
Yeah, I would be happy to teach. Absolutely. Yeah, we'll
Wonderful.
just get offline and schedule it and let people know when we will do that. And we will do it live again, and hopefully somehow that we will be able to also answer some live questions.
Yeah, that would be great.
Maybe we will allow people to sign up so that they will join us right in Zoom, right? Some people.
Cool.
And then maybe they can ask questions directly, practice with us directly, and also ask some questions directly.
That's actually a really great idea. What I never would have thought of. So thank you for that. You're always pushing me out of my comfort zone, Mila. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. More
That's awesome.
coming.
Great.
Always.
Awesome. I like it. All right. Let me go ahead and end the podcast there.